What's up guys, you're watching NorCal Daily Driven. My name is Salim and it's been a while since I've made a video. So anyway, I got maybe a couple hours. My son is sleeping right now. I'm trying to knock something out, so let's see if we could get this done. As you guys can see, I got the ZR1 in the back. I got it up on a small ramp here. Little side note on the ramp. If you guys don't have the money for race ramps, that's like a name brand low profile ramp. I found these on Amazon. They're called discount ramps. I think they were like $30 or $40. Fits under a lowered Z06, ZR1, whatever. This is ZR1 obviously, with the front splitter. Fits under there, no problem. I could drive right up on top of it. Then I could slide my jack in. Because obviously if you have a lowered car or a low profile car, you know the pains of getting it on a jack. So I got it on a jack, and you're asking me why I gotta have it on a jack. Well, a little backstory here. If anybody who is into Corvettes or is a Corvette enthusiast knows the name Jim Mero. If you don't know Jim Mero, then I don't know. I probably wouldn't call you a Corvette enthusiast. Jim Mero was the head suspension design engineer and also unprofessional Nürburgring track tester and local track tester for Corvette for several years. I think maybe over 10 years. He was the guy developing, tuning, testing all the suspension systems on all the Corvettes up until maybe, I don't know, a couple years ago. Now he's retired and he's into a new endeavor. So if you have a C7 Corvette of any kind, Jim Mero was the one who created the update recently for the magnetic ride control, the MRC suspension setup. It's got a controller in it. Basically, they do new algorithms or whatever to control your touring setting, your sports setting, your race setting, your weather setting, your eco setting, all those settings that you have in a C7. They're able to control it and adjust the dampening, right? So that's what magnetic ride control is. You have magnetic shocks in the car, the fluid inside there. It's got some kind of magnetic fluid. When they, adjust the knob on the dash, it sends a charge or whatever to the fluid. It changes the characteristics of the viscosity of the fluid. It gets really nerdy, right? If you're into that, you already know what I'm talking about. Anyway, he designed it for the C7. He wanted to bring that back to the C6 platform. I mean, this is kind of crazy, right? Because people forgot about the C6. We're already onto C8s. I'm sure you've seen the C8 release or whatever. But Jim was like, I'm going to make something for the C6s because we didn't have this knowledge of technology or whatever that we did when we created the C6. So maybe people are interested in this. So he created a post on the Corvette forum, asked people, hey, are you guys interested in a magnetic ride control update for your C6? Whether it's Grand Sport, whether it's, I'm not sure if Z51s came with it, maybe they did. Grand Sport, Z06 and ZR1, 2010 and plus, they all came with magnetic ride control. So on our cars, we have two settings, right? We have touring and sport. And according to him, the explanation is sport is more of a full-on race setting. So unless you're on a racetrack, you're really not going to get the full benefit of the race setting because the dampening is amplified so much more and the car becomes so much more stiff that a lot of people complain using that sport setting on the street or on a back road, right? I mean, if you know anything about vehicle dynamics, if you're in a bump and the car is very stiff and it jumps over that bump in mid-turn, you're upsetting the car, right? You want the car to absorb that bump and be able to keep pushing through it, whether you're on the throttle or you're just, you're riding out constant throttle just to make it through the end of the turn so that you could gas out. If you hit that bump, it upsets the car, you could risk spinning out, or you're just not, your suspension's not efficiently absorbing the road. So most of the time I roll around and tour because, I mean, any city street, if you guys are familiar with your city roads or whatever, it's most likely bumpy, right? They don't fix the roads out here. It's not racetrack smooth. So I ride around and tour. It's a lot more compliant. Even then, it's pretty bumpy, right? But you're probably like, oh, it's a sports car, it's supposed to be bumpy. It's supposed to be stiff, but it should absorb the undulations in the road, right? So that's what a lot of these newer cars with a lot of more sophisticated dampening, you're able to drive them, these very sophisticated sports cars, you're able to drive them on the road and it's very smooth until you crank it up into that sport or race setting or whatever, and then you could get that really stiff feeling that you're looking for. But again, you can't exploit that on the street, right? It's just going to set the vehicle. So he came up with an idea of like, I'm going to make the tour mode a lot more compliant to the road, so it'll absorb the bumps more, but your car's not going to feel like a Cadillac, right? It's still going to be sporty. So it with all the suspension changes or the dampening changes it makes, it actually betters your steering response, even though it has nothing to do with your steering. It's not connected. That controller doesn't, we don't have electronic steering or whatever, but it betters the steering response. It controls the car better. It's still flat in the corner, but you have a lot more compliance, right? So you're not getting beat up on the road. And then when you put it into sport mode, it's a true sport mode. It's not a full race mode, right? So instead of like 10 times the amplification of the shocks and the car becoming super stiff, you get maybe 3 or 4 times the amplification. It becomes a true sport mode, so you could actually use it on the street. You could actually use it in a back road, right? Because this is considering you're going to have bumps in the road, right? It's not a smooth racetrack. So install it. So to get it installed, let me go through it real quick. Earlier, when I did all the modifications to the engine, I put an E85 sensor in it. You have to run it from the fuel rail all the way over. Basically, the 3 ECUs to the car sit over here, right? So it's like the engine controller, the suspension controller, and there's one more behind here. So unfortunately, we have to remove the fender. So in order to do that, there's these screws that go along the inside of the fender. There's one actually in here, but in order to get to it, you got to remove the wheel liner. And I'm only going to peel back the fender. I'm not going to completely remove it because there's actually rivets down there, and I don't want to remove the rivets. And I did it this way when I did the E85 sensor, so shouldn't be a problem. I'm not going to get too in depth with the install. He's got a video on his website, but I will show you a couple of steps as I get through it, and then we'll go ahead and install it. Let me show you what the controller actually looks like. So if you've seen any of the GM body control units or suspension control units or whatever, this is what they look like. It's usually a flat computer board or motherboard, whatever you want to call it. Then it's got the hookup for your ECU or your harness, sorry. And then, so this is hiding behind that fender. We're going to go ahead and remove the fender, pull this out, plug in the new one, see if we actually see a difference. Okay guys, I got the fender off. It might look crazy. It might look like a chop shop right now. But trust me, everything's safe. I didn't scratch anything. That's how you're supposed to do it. So let me bring you over here. Had to take off the 3 bolts that hold the fender to the bumper. So there's 2 here. There's like 1 under here. You'd have to see what I'm talking about. You take 1 screw off the front bumper so that you could unclip the bumper from the fender. Then there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 screws at the top of the fender. And then that really hard one to get to is this one right here. If you could see that, where that hole is right there, it mounts to that bracket right adjacent to it. But in order to get through it, you got to get it from under here. So that's what's the hardest part for me, because you're fishing an extension in there with a 7mm socket, and then you're feeling around for it. That's why I have to pull the top of the fender away so that I get some access to it. Other people have been successful without having to do that. They just do everything from the bottom. They pull the rivet that holds the side skirt to the fender, then they re-rivet it or whatever. I didn't want to do that. I've done it this way last time when I did the 85 sensor. So we need to get to the ECUs, or the multiple computers here basically, right here on this bracket. So this main one on top is for the engine, and that's where I pinned the E85 sensor. But that thinner one under it, that's the one we're trying to get to. So once I remove all this, then I'll show you how that one goes back together. Alright guys, so 2 10mm on the engine control module. Drop that out of the way. Suspension control module. You lift up on this tab, it unhooks, swivels that out of the way, pop the harness off. There's another tab here, you just click it out of the way, then you just slide it out. Like so. So there you go. I know this thing looks scary. People are like, I don't want to touch that. I'm going to ruin the car or whatever. But trust me, it goes together like a puzzle, right? Pull it off one way, it goes on one way. There it is, guys, all back together. Slid the new one in. The harness only goes on one way. It's basically a hinge. You hook it up from the top, latch the bottom, clicks in. Put the engine harness back on. 2 bolts at the bottom here. Boom, done. Now we're just going to reassemble. Make sure everything lines up correctly, and then we'll see how this goes. Alright guys, I got it wrapped up. It's all back together. You can see the body lines and everything. Front bumper, fender. Looks just as good as it does as I took it off. I got the wheel back on. I got to torque that down, clean up my tools. Unfortunately, I can't just jump in and drive it right now. I'm on solo daddy daycare duty today, so gotta wait till my wife gets home so she can watch the kid or my son, and then I can take the car out for a spin and see how things go. Because right now I really want to jump in and just drive it, but unfortunately they don't make Corvette approved baby seats until you're like 3 or something like that. So it'll be in this video though. So next clip. Thanks. What's up, guys? So I'm picking up the video where I left it off. I installed the Jim Mero MagnaRide controller update. I didn't get to test it out right after I installed it, but it's been a few days. I did take the car out a couple times already, and just wanted to let you guys know how everything is. So in the tour mode, which is now changed, it's got a different calibration. It's a lot more. It's a lot more comforting. I don't know what you want to call it. It absorbs the road a lot better, right? So that's one of the things I noticed. So going over bumps, going over train track crossings, going over expansion joints on the highway, the car soaks it up way better than it did before. I would go over these certain expansion joints on my commute to work and to home, and the car would just like literally crash over these bumps. And I'm sure you know what I'm talking about if you have a ZR1. It's not the most compliant ride, right? But obviously it's a sports car. It's not supposed to be super soft. But sports cars of today, of like 2019, 2018, whatever, 2017, they are compliant. They are a lot more forgiving. And that's what I think is great about this update, is that you get that setting now, right? Those guys in the C7s that have the new magnetic ride control, and they're getting that comfort, or the comfort mode, or the tour mode, whatever they call it in that car, and the sport, and then the track mode, they have this kind of ride. The chassis soaks up the bumps and everything a lot better, and I think that's something that was missing from our cars that would kind of beat us up. And I don't know, some people it might prevent some people from daily driving their car, right? They're like, oh, I don't want to daily drive it, the car's too stiff or whatever. I mean, obviously that's not the case for me. I don't really care. I drive it either way. But this just makes it that much better, right? I'm commuting right now in work, or to work, and there's nothing but traffic. But I mean, on the way to work, there's tons of bumps and you know, grooves in the road, and expansion joints that this thing goes over, that before I would dread, right? I would brake before that. I knew where they were coming, and you braced yourself. I don't know, you're a car guy, you go over speed bumps, or you go over a pothole, you know it's coming, you kind of brace yourself, because the hit the car takes, you feel like you're taking that hit. I don't know, it's kind of like a connection that you have with your car, right? I do that sometimes when my wife's in the car and I know there's a huge bump coming and it hits really hard, especially in this car. I just make it like, oh, and she's like, what's wrong? I was like, babe, my car could have got fucked up right there, or could have got messed up, sorry. Like, who knows, you know, I could crack, you could crack a shock tower, you could rip a mount out, you could crack a wheel, whatever. And she doesn't get that until she's got a Mercedes C-Class, and we were driving somewhere in the Bay Area, and it's a really crappy freeway or highway, and we went over a speed bump, or a pothole, and her car's got 19-inch low-profile tires. Comes with the factory sport mode, or sport edition C-Class, and we went over that pothole, and I knew, man, I knew something happened, because that car just crashed over that pothole. And I was like, holy crap, man. I was like, hopefully we didn't blow a tire. Luckily, we didn't blow a tire. We got home that weekend. But I noticed as we were getting home, the tire pressure was dropping and dropping. And I removed the wheel. Come to find out, the wheel had a crack in it. And a bend. So I had to take it to a shop. They welded it. They fixed the bent wheel or whatever. But the guy was like, well, you know, I won't be able to repair it again if it happens again, because, you know, the wheel can only take so much. But like I was saying, you know, those are the types of situations you don't want to be in your ZR1, right? You want the shocks to be able to absorb whatever the road's going to throw at you, and you can't predict every road because you haven't been on every road. But yeah, in the comfort or the tour mode, it's way better. I mean, it just soaks everything up. And I mean, there's still some bumps that are, you know, just unavoidable that you can't do anything about. Even if you have an SUV and you go over it, you're still gonna feel it. But I mean, the majority of things that you're crossing over, the car just glides over it way better, just absorbs that bump way better. And just for that alone, I think the update is way worth it, right? I mean, before this thing would just crash over those bumps, and now you just soak it up and you just keep going. It doesn't really you don't really feel it as hard translating through the chassis and then getting obviously to you. When I put it in sport mode, now you actually feel the difference. Before, I feel like when I would put it in tour to sport, it wouldn't really change that much. The car was still stiff. It just got even crazier stiff. But I felt like, you know, the same way it would crash over a bump in tour mode, it would crash just as hard in sport mode. But now you actually feel the difference, right? The car gets a little bit more taut. It gets more planted. The body lean is less. Which happened before too. I'm just telling you the differences between the tour and the sport now. But it's still not as stiff as it used to be. It's not as stiff as the original sport mode. This sport mode soaks up the bumps still just better than it did before in sport mode, and you still get the car still tightens up. The steering does get a little bit more responsive. Not that he changes anything in the steering calibration, because obviously we don't have some kind of adjustable ratio rack or anything like that. But it's just because the dampening becomes tighter, the car gets more docile. I haven't really had a chance to throw it around too much in the sport mode. I mean, obviously, you know, I've done a few on and off ramps. I'm sure plenty of you guys do on and off ramps. You try to see, you know, what the posted speed limit is, see if you can double or triple that. Obviously, I don't know if you're tripling it, but you're definitely doubling it. But yeah, I mean, it handles just as good as it did before, but it just soaks up that mid-corner bump a lot better, right? There's this one on-ramp that I take every morning to the gym, and I've taken the car to the gym a few times in the morning now. And it's mid on-ramp. The on-ramp's like, you know, 30 or whatever, and I'm blasting it at like 65. And there's that one bump that I always like, oh man, hopefully the car doesn't get upset over this bump. And before it would like kind of skip over that bump, and now it just soaks it up, like it's not even there, right? The car doesn't get upset at all. Like I don't have to squint or close my eyes and, you know, pray that the car doesn't get upset in the traction control or the stability control has to kick in or whatever. Like now it just ride over it, no problem. But like I said, if you want, I think it's worth it alone just for the tour setting. In the sport mode, you know, if people don't use their sport, you know, they're not huge, you know, back road drivers. They're not really, you know, canyon carvers or whatever you want to call it. They don't go to the actual racetrack to use it. I really think that you'll be fine with the new tour and the new sport. But for me, I think I might send the controller back. I know it's kind of annoying. I gotta pull it back out of the fender or whatever. I might send the controller back and have Jim update it to the, because he's got two settings for sport. He's got sport and then super sport. So the super sport is 30% more sportier or stiffer, or whatever you want to call it, than the sport that he sends it with originally. So I think I'm gonna send it back for that, because I do want to make it out to a couple track days. I used to go to the track a lot when I've had lower horsepower BMWs or whatever, and that's obviously before my son was born, so I had a lot more time. But I want to try to get this car out to the road course some point soon. So I think that it would that if I had the super sport, at least, that, you know, it'd become a lot more useful on the track. I might be left wanting more with just the sport mode. So guys, hopefully I was able to capture, you know, my opinion or my review of the controller well in this short clip. I know it's hard, well, at least it's hard for me to describe to you guys, you know, how well this thing works now. It's something you have to actually feel, right? So we spend more than $325 on miscellaneous parts for the engine, so I don't think $325 is going to break the bank for most people. On a second gear roll, I hit it in 40. I think it squats a little bit more. I think we get a little bit more weight transfer just because the shocks are not as taut, not as stiff, so the front will lift up even more, the rear will squat down even more. And obviously, you know, you drag racers or you Mexico racers or whatever you want to call it, us Mexico racers, because obviously I'm doing it all the time. That's my buddy to pass by. But yeah, the car squats hard and it takes off just like it used to. I think it squats just a little bit more now because the shocks are a little softer probably. So it might be a good upgrade for you guys as well. I know some of the guys on the Facebook page have been hitting up Jim to make a drag race setting instead of, you know, the tour mode or the sport mode or whatever. They want one of the modes to become a drag setup so that the car probably squats really hard on takeoff. But anyway, hopefully you guys got something or informational. Hopefully this review was useful. I'm sorry that I've talked so much, but anyway, Until the next video, guys, I appreciate you tuning in, and I'll catch you on the next one. Take care.